The fluorescent lights of the emergency room hummed with that particular frequency that always gave me a headache. I blinked, disoriented, staring at the sterile white ceiling tiles. My body felt heavy, foreign, and the antiseptic smell burned my nostrils. The last thing I remembered was the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, and the C-ring pain of impact. I had been driving home from my sister's engagement party. My parents had spent the entire evening praising Emma's perfect match, while I sat in the corner nursing a drink I didn't want, watching them shine their spotlight on the golden child. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside me. I sat up slowly, ignoring the dizziness that washed over me. The hospital gown was rough against my skin, and when I looked down at my hands, they were younger. Smoother. The tiny scar I'd gotten from a king accident at 27 was gone. My 27-year-old hands had been replaced by something that looked like they belonged to my 20-year-old self. That's when the door burst open. My mother rushed in, her face a mask of familiar worry and frustration. She was younger too, her hair still rich with its natural color, the deep worry lines around her eyes less pronounced than I remembered. My father followed close behind, his jaw tight, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Finally awake, my mother said, but there was no RMTH in it. You've been out for 3 hours. Emma is beside herself with worry. She had to leave her engagement shoot early to come to this hospital. My father nodded. Your sister was supposed to be picking out her wedding dress today. She arranged her entire schedule because you had to go and be reckless on the road. I read at them. This had happened before. This exact moment. The car accident in my sophomore year of college. I'd been driving back from visiting them when a truck ran a red light. The impact had been minor, nothing serious, just a concussion and some bruises. But my parents had shown up at the hospital not to check on me, but to complain about how my carelessness had inconvenienced my sister. The memories hit me like a physical blow. The of being second best, of being told I needed to be more like Emma, of watching my parents empty their savings into Emma's ART school tuition while I worked 3 jobs to pay for my business degree. The countless family gatherings where my accomplishments were mentioned in a single sentence before the conversation returned to Emma's latest exhibition. The moment I'd finally built my company from nothing, my parents had shown up at the opening night to ask if I could spare a few thousand for Emma's gallery startup. And then the final memory, the engagement party for Emma's second marriage, where my parents had toasted their perfect daughter, while I sat alone, a multimillionaire corporate still invisible to them. The drive home in the rain, my TRS blurring the road. The accident that had ended my life at 34. But I was here now. 20 years old again. In this hospital bed. With my parents standing over me, already laying the groundwork for a lifetime of neglect. Emma's waiting in the car, my father said, glancing at his watch. She's got a headache from all this stress. Can you hurry up and get ridged so we can get her home? Something snapped inside me. In my previous life, I would have apologized. I would have rushed through the discharge process, minimized my injuries, made myself smaller so as not to inconvenience anyone. I would have spent the next 14 years trying to earn their approval, never quite understanding why I couldn't measure up. But not this time. I pulled the heart monitor leads off my chest with deliberate slowness. No, I said, my voice clear and steadied up. My mother blinked. What do you mean, no? I mean I'm not leaving yet. The doctor said I need to stay overnight for observation. The concussion was worse than they thought. It was a lie. I had been fine. But I remembered the discharge papers I'd signed last time, remembered how I'd stumbled out of the hospital with a splitting headache while my parents rushed Emma home. My father's eyes narrowed. You can't be serious. Emma can wait, I said, and the words tasted like honey. She's an adult. She can handle a headache. Or she can go home, and you can come back for me tomorrow. Whatever works for you. The shock on their faces was almost laughable. In all my years of existence, in this life and the last, I had never spoken to them this way. I had been the compliant one, the people pleaser, the one who never made waves. You're being selfish, my mother said, and there it was, the word they'd used to define me for as long as I could remember. After everything Emma's sacrificed for you, what exactly has Emma sacrificed for me, Mom? I asked, my tone conversational. Name one thing. She opened her mouth, then closed it. My father shifted uncomfortably. She's your sister, he finally said. She doesn't need to prove her love right. Unlike me, who apparently has to constantly prove myself worthy of basic consideration. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cold floor shocking against my bare feet. You know what I remember? I remember Emma getting a brand new car for her 16th birthday while I got her hand-me-down. I remember paying for my own textbooks with money from my part-time job because you said I needed to Leah RN responsibility, while Emma's ART supplies were always covered. I remember you missing my college graduation because Emma had a panic attack that turned out to be a stubbed toe. My mother's face had gone pale. That's not, let me finish. I stood up, and for the first time in my life, I was looking down at them. I'd always felt smaller in their presence, diminished. But I was 5'7", and they were both under 5'5". I just never realized how much power I had. I'm going to stay here tonight. I'm going to rest. And tomorrow, I'm going to start living my life on my terms. You can go home and comfort Emma. That's what you're best at, isn't it? My father stepped forward, his face reddening. You're being dramatic. Your mother and I have given you everything. Everything except attention, I cut in. Everything except validation. Everything except the basic love that a child deserves from their parents. But don't worry. I'm done expecting it. I walked past them toward the door. I'm going to find my nurse and ask for some pain medication. The door's behind you. Or if you want to wait, the waiting room is down the hall. Emma's got my number if she needs to yell at me. I walked out without looking back. In the hallway, I pressed my back against the cold wall and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My hands were shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a hollow ache in my chest. Part of me wanted to run after them, to apologize, to fix things. That part of me was the ghost of the old Aurora, the one who had died in that car accident at 34. But I wasn't her anymore. I was 20 years old, with a second chance and a lifetime of knowledge about what didn't work. The choices I'd made before, the endless hoping, the constant striving for approval, the willingness to make myself small for people who would never see me, those choices had led me to a lonely death with a shattered heart. I wasn't going to make them again. I found a nurse's station and asked for a glass of water. My throat was raw, and my head was pounding, but it wasn't the kind of headache that required medication. It was the kind that came from having your entire worldview turned upside down. The nurse, a kind-faced woman named Brenda, brought me the water and sat with me for a few minutes while I drank it. She asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. It was easier than explaining what had just happened, what I'd just done. When I got back to my room, my parents were gone. The room felt emptier without them. Cleaner. I climbed back into the hospital bed and read at the ceiling, trying to process the enormity of what had just happened. I'd stood up to them. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I'd stood up to them. And I hadn't just stood up to them, I told them the truth. The ugly, painful truth that I'd spent my entire previous life swallowing down because I was afraid of losing them. But I had lost them. I'd lost them the minute I was born, and they'd looked at Emma and decided she was the one they really wanted. I just spent the next 34 years pretending otherwise. Not anymore. The next morning, I discharged myself from the hospital. I took a cab back to my pa-rent's house, where I'd been staying for the summer break from Westbrook University. The house was quiet when I walked in. My pa-rents were at work. Emma was probably still asleep, or pretending to be dead. I went up to my childhood bedroom, the small one at the back of the house, the one with the single window that looked out at the neighbor's fence instead of the garden like Emma's did. I packed my bags. I packed everything. The clothes, the books, the small collection of things that were actually mine. I was done. I was done with this house. I was done with this family. I was done with being the forgotten daughter. Before I left, I went into my pa-rent's home office. I knew where they kept the important documents, the safety deposit box key, the deeds, the financial papers. I wasn't looking for those. I was looking for something else. The small blue folder that held the paperwork for my college fund. I'd always known they'd set one up for me, back when I was born. Every child in our family got one. It was tradition. My grandfather had rooted it for my father, and my father had continued it for us. But when I'd root college, they'd told me there was no money left. They'd said they'd had to use it for emergency expenses. I'd believed them. I'd worked 3 jobs to pay my tuition, and I hadn't questioned it. Now, I opened the folder and looked at the statements. Sure enough, the account had been drained. But not for emergency expenses. The withdrawals were all dated the same year our Emma had root art school. They'd taken my college fund, my inheritance, my future, and they'd spent it on her. I stood there, looking at the bank statements, and I felt something crack inside me. Not the anger I'd expected. Not the pain. Just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that they weren't capable of loving me. I could see that now. They weren't cruel people, not in the way that mattered. They just didn't see me. They'd never seen me. And they never would. I took the folder and put it in my bag. I wasn't going to use it against them. I wasn't going to start a fight. I was just going to leave. And I was never coming back. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. 4 years later, I sat in my cramped office in downtown San Jose, ring at my computer screen. Novatech was in its infancy, just me, a handful of freelancers I'd hired, and a dream that was slowly turning into reality. The company had gotten its first round of funding, and I'd just signed my first major client. I'd done it. I'd built something from nothing. I'd done it without my pa-rent's help. Without their support. Without even their belief that I could do it. I'd done it alone. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw my mother's name. She'd been calling for months, ever since the first article about Novatech app I read in a tech blog. I'd ignored every call, every voicemail, every text. I let this one go too. The next year, my company was named one of the fastest growing startups in Silicon Valley. I made the cover of a business magazine. I was invited to speak at conferences. I was, by any measure, a success. And my pa-rents kept calling. They kept leaving voicemails about how proud they were, how much they wanted to see me, how they'd made mistakes and they were sorry. But I knew they weren't sorry. They were just impressed. And I knew that if I let them back into my life, they'd find a way to ask for something. Money, connections, a way to show off their successful daughter. They were looking for a prize, not a person. I wasn't going to be their prize. So I kept my distance. I kept working. I kept building. And I kept telling myself that I didn't need them, that I was fine on my own, that the family I'd chosen was enough. And it was. It really was. But sometimes, late at night, when I was alone in my apartment with the city lights glowing outside my window, I wondered what it would be like to have pa-rents who actually loved me. What it would be like to call them when something good happened, and have them see because it was me, not because of what I could do for them. What it would be like to be wanted. But I wasn't going to find out. Because I'd learned, in the hardest possible way, that some people just can't give you what you need. And spending your whole life begging for it doesn't make them any more able to give it. It just makes you more broken. That I was done being broken. I was done begging. I was done hoping that they'd finally see me. That I was going to build my own life. And I was going to be happy. Even if it killed me. 2 years passed in a blur of strategic moves and calculated risks. I dropped out of Westbrook University after my sophomore year, using the money from my grandmother's inheritance to rent a small office space in the seediest part of downtown. My parents called me a fool. Emma posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story about siblings who abandoned their families for delusions of grandeur. I didn't respond to any of it. The first year was brutal. I slept on a fold-out couch in the office, showered at the gym down the street, and existed entirely on instant ramen and coffee. I spent my days cold calling investors, refining my pitch, and building the prototype for what would become Novatech's flagship product, an AI-driven business analytics tool that predicted market trends with unprecedented accuracy. In my previous life, I developed the concept slowly, carefully, over a decade. But now, with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight and a memory that wouldn't let me forget the mistakes I'd made the first time around, I moved at lightning speed. By the end of year 1, I had secured my first angel investor, a retired tech executive named Thomas Chen who saw something in my pitch that others missed. By the end of year 2, Novatech had its first major client, a Fortune 500 company looking to revolutionize their supply chain management. I was 22 years old, the youngest founder in the tech incubator, and I was already a millionaire on paper. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 2 years. They tried to reach out, of course, especially when they saw the first news articles about the brilliant young entrepreneur making waves in Silicon Valley. My mother had called. My father had texted. Emma had sent a Facebook message so full of fake enthusiasm and subtle digs that I'd screenshot it for posterity. But I kept them at arm's length. I had learned my lesson. The only way to maintain my peace was to maintain my distance. So when the story broke in Forbes, Aurora Mills, the visionary behind Novatech's meteoric rise, and my parents showed up at my office building without warning, I shouldn't have been surprised that the call came from my executive assistant, a sharp young woman named Simone who had been with me for nearly a year. Ms. Mills, there are 2 people at the front desk claiming to be your parents. They're quite insistent. I was in a meeting with 3 board members, discussing a potential acquisition. In my previous life, I would have dropped everything to see them. I would have been flustered, anxious, desperate to impress them with my success. I would have been, in short, still the red child who craved their approval. But I wasn't that person anymore. Tell them I'm in a meeting and can't be disturbed, I said calmly. If they want to wait, the lobby has chairs. Simone, can you send in some coffee, the good stuff from the cafe downstairs? I'm not a complete monster. The board members chuckled, but I could see the curiosity in their eyes. They knew my story, the rough background, the familial estrangement, but I kept the details private. This was my professional life, and I'd learned the hard way that family drama and business didn't mix well. The meeting continued for another hour. When it finally ended, I walked to the window of my corner office and looked down at the street below. The building was on the 38th floor, and the city sprawled beneath me like a glittering grid of possibility. They were still here. I'd had Simone send me a text update every 20 minutes. After the first hour, they'd stopped pacing and sat down. After the second, my mother had root crying. After the third, my father had begun yelling at the receptionist, only to be told politely that he was welcome to leave at any time. That they couldn't leave. I knew that. They were here for something, and whatever it was, they wouldn't leave until they got it. It was almost funny. In my previous life, I'd spent 14 years trying to get them to show up for me. I'd ached for their presence at my company's milestones, for their pride at my accomplishments. I'd cried in the bathroom at my own engagement party because they'd left EARLY to go to Emma's ART show opening. And now here they were, desperate to see me. I was the center of attention, the one they'd come to. But it didn't feel good. It felt hollow. Empty. Like a meal you'd waited your whole life to eat, only to find it stale and tasteless. I took a deep breath and walked to the elevator. The lobby was quiet when I stepped off. My parents were sitting in the sleek white leather chairs near the fountain, looking profoundly out of place. My mother was wearing a dress that was too formal, too anxious, as if she'd dressed for an event she wasn't sure she was invited to. My father was in a suit, but it was rumpled, like he'd slept in it. They stood up when they saw me. Aurora, my mother said, her voice breaking. Oh, my God, look at you. I didn't move. I stood at the edge of the lobby, my hands clasped in front of me, my face fully neutral. Mom. Dad. This is a surprise. We tried to call, my father said. You changed your number. Your address. We didn't know how to reach you. That was intentional, I said. What are you doing here? My mother stepped forward, her arms outstretched. I didn't move to embrace her. She hesitated, her arms dropping to her sides. We saw the article. The Forbes article. We wanted to, we needed to. To congratulate me, I raised an eyebrow. That's nice. I sent you an invitation to the launch party. You didn't RSVP. My father's face went red. We didn't get it. There must have been a mistake. And even if we did, we didn't know if you'd want us there. You've been so distant, Aurora. So cold. We didn't know what to do. That's the second time you've accused me of being cold, I said. The first time was in the hospital, 2 years ago. Do you remember that? My mother looked like she was about to cry. Of course we remember. We were worried sick about you. Were you? I asked. Because I remember you being worried about Emma. I remember you telling me to hurry up and get ridged so you could take her home. I remember the word, selfish, being thrown around. Am I remembering wrong? My mother's mouth opened and closed. That was a stressful time. We didn't mean, every time with you is a stressful time, I said, and my voice was calm, controlled, the voice I used when I was closing a difficult deal. Every time I was in crisis, it was always about how it affected Emma. Every time I needed something, it was always about how it would inconvenience Emma. And now you show up at my office, without calling, without asking, and you expect me to just, what? Let you back in, Aurora, please, my father said, and there was something desperate in his voice that I'd never heard before. We've made mistakes. We know that. But you're our daughter. We love you. I laughed. It was a ha-rsh sound, surprising even me. You love me? Do you even know me? Do you know what I've been through? Do you know what it was like to be your daughter, to watch you pour all your love and attention into Emma while I was just, they're invisible, unimportant? That's not true, my mother said, but her voice was weak. Let me tell you something, I said, walking closer to them. ISTA root Novatech with zero help from you. Zero. I built this company from nothing, with nobody's support but my own. And I did it because I had to. Because I knew, from the time I was a teenager, that I couldn't count on you. That if I didn't build something for myself, I would end up with nothing. You could have asked us for help, my father said. We would have, would you? I asked. Because when I asked for help paying for college, you said I needed to RN responsibility. When I asked for help rooting my first business, you said I was being unrealistic. When I asked for basic emotional support, you told me I was being dramatic. I took a breath. I stopped asking years ago. And I learned to do it myself. So I don't need you now. I don't need anything from you. I just want to know, why are you really here? My mother's face crumpled. It's Emma. Of course. Of course it was what about her? I asked, My voice flattened. She's in trouble, my father said. She invested in this gallery with a man who turned out to be a con artist. He took all the money and now she's drowning in debt. We've put everything we have into helping her, but it's not enough. We don't have any more. We thought, he stopped, swallowed. We thought maybe you could help. ISTA read at them. 2 years of silence, 2 years of me building my empire, 2 years of them ignoring my success. And now, the only reason they'd come was to ask for money. I should have been angry. I should have been crushed. But all I felt was a vast, overwhelming emptiness. Emma made a bad investment, I said slowly. And you want me to bail her out? She's your sister, my mother said, her voice pleading. We know you two haven't always gotten along, but she's family. You can't turn your back on family. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was rooting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. I'd always loved sunsets. They were a reminder that even endings could be gorgeous. I'm not going to give you money, I said. And before you start, let me explain why. It's not because I'm bitter, even though I have every right to be. It's because giving Emma money is the worst possible thing you could do for her. She will never learn financial responsibility if you keep bailing her out. She will never grow up if you keep saving her from her mistakes. And you will never stop enabling her if you don't learn to say no. This is different, my father said. This is a crisis. Everything is a crisis with her, I said. Always has been. She's your crisis. Not mine. I turned to face them. I'm not saying this to punish her. I'm saying it because I genuinely believe it's the best thing for her. And I'm not saying no because I don't have the money. I have plenty of money. But my money isn't the solution to a problem that my sister needs to solve herself. My mother had crying in earnest now. You don't understand. You've always had everything so easy. You're so capable, so smart. You've never needed anyone. I let out a bitter laugh. You kidding me? I needed you. Every single day of my childhood, I needed you to see me, to hear me, to love me. And you didn't. So I taught myself not to need anyone. That's not having it easy. That's survival. We can't fix the past, my father said. But we can fix the future. Please, Aurora. Just give us a chance. Come to dinner. Spend time with us. Let us show you that we. No, I said, and the word hung in the air between us. I'm not going to be your ATM and I'm not going to be your guilt project. If you want a relationship with me, you have to want it for me. Not for my money. Not because you feel guilty. Because you actually want to know me. And I don't think you do. I think you want the idea of me. The successful daughter you can trot out to make you look good. Aurora, my mother root up security, I called out, and two uniformed guards read from the door behind the reception desk. Please escort my parents to their vehicle. They're not welcome to stay. My father's face went white. You can't do this. We're your parents. You can't just throw us out. Watch me. I turned and walked back to the elevator. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad. I hope Emma gets her life together. And I hope, someday, you'll understand what you lost. The elevator doors slid shut between us. I leaned against the wall of the elevator car and closed my eyes. My hands were shaking again. My heart was pounding. I felt like I'd just run a marathon. The doors opened on my floor, and I walked back to my office on autopilot. Simone looked up from her desk as I passed. Are you okay, Ms. Mills? She asked, her eyes full of concern. I'm fine, I said automatically. I just need a few minutes. I closed my office door and leaned against it, letting out a long, slow breath. I'd done it. I'd told them no. I'd set a boundary and I'd held it. And even though it had hurt like hell, I knew it was the right thing to do. That I walked to my desk and sat down heavily. My computer screen was still lit up with the financial projections for the acquisition we were considering. I read at the numbers, but they didn't make sense. My head was too full of everything that had just happened. I knew they would say I was cold, selfish, ungrateful. They'd probably go home and tell Emma all about how their heartless daughter had thrown them out of her fancy office. They'd paint themselves as victims and me as the villain. And for a moment, I wondered if they were right. Maybe I was cold. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I was the one who had been wrong all along. Then I remembered the bank statements. The college fund they'd drained. The years of being invisible. The way they'd shown up at my office not to celebrate my success, but to ask for help for Emma. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't cold. I was just stunned. I picked up my phone and called Priya. She answered on the first ring. Hey, I said, my voice shaking. Can you come over tonight? I need to talk. Of course, she said immediately. What happened to my parents? Showed up, I said. They wanted money for Emma. I threw them out. Oh, Aurora. Her voice was full of sympathy. That's rough. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. But it's okay. I'm okay. I need to not be alone tonight. I'll be there in an hour, she said. Just hang in there. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. The city lights were rooting to twinkle outside my window, and the sky was a deep, dark blue. I'd always loved this time of day, the transition from day to night, when the city was between worlds. That I watched the lights flicker on, one by one, and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The anger. The pain. The grief. I let it wash over me, and I let it go. Tomorrow, I would be strong again. Tomorrow, I would go back to building my empire. But tonight, I was just a girl who wanted her parents to love her, and who had finally accepted that they never would. 10 years of silence. 10 years of building, of growing, of turning Novatech into a global powerhouse. 10 years of therapy, of learning to love myself, of building a chosen family out of friends and colleagues who actually saw me. 10 years of watching my parents from a distance. It was hard not to. My face was on magazine covers, my name was in business journals, my company was the subject of countless articles about women who changed the game. I'd been on the cover of Time twice. I'd spoken at the UN. I'd donated billions to causes I read about, women's education, mental health, small business grants for underprivileged communities. My parents saw it all. And they called. They wrote letters. They sent emails that I never replied to. I had them all in a folder labeled History, a reminder of everything I'd left behind. I was 36 now, the age I'd been when I died in my first life. But I wasn't the same person. I was confident. Grounded. Happier than I'd ever been. I had a small but fierce group of friends, a beautiful apartment in the city, and a company that was doing real good in the world. And I had my sister's number blocked. Emma's life had spiraled after the gallery debacle. She'd married and divorced twice, had a child she couldn't afford, and was currently living with our parents in the house I'd grown up in. Her career had never really recovered from the financial scandal. Sometimes I felt a pang of guilt, but then I remembered the $3,000 she'd stolen from me when I was 19. The lies she'd told about me to our cousins. The way she'd laughed when I cried. Some relationships weren't meant to be fixed. Tonight was the annual Novatech Gala, the biggest event of the year. I'd been hosting it for 5 years now, raising money for our education foundation. It was a glittering affair, champagne, caviar, celebrities, and some of the most powerful people in the tech world. That I was in the middle of a conversation with the CEO of a major entertainment conglomerate when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Aurora. I turned and found myself staring at my mother. She looked old. Frail. The IRS had been unkind to her. Her hair was thin, her skin sallow, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Mom," I said, and my voice was ice. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know. I'm sorry. I had to see you." She looked around at the opulent ballroom, the chandeliers, the people in their designer gowns. This is amazing. You've done so much." "Thank you." I took a sip of my champagne. "You should leave. I'll have security escort you to the door." "Please," she said, and her voice cracked. "Just give me a few minutes. Your father's in the hospital. He had a heart attack last week." I set my glass down carefully. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope he recovers. Can you come see him? He's been asking for you." "We've all been asking for you, Aurora. It's been so long. We've missed you so much." My heart clenched, but I pushed the feeling down. "I appreciate you telling me. But I can't come. I made a decision a long time ago to prioritize my peace, and seeing you would disturb that peace." My mother's face crumpled. "I know we made mistakes. I know we hurt you. But we've changed. We've grown. Please, Aurora. Just give us one more chance." "Mom." I took her hand, and she looked down at it like she couldn't believe I was touching her. "I know you think you've changed. But I don't think you understand what you put me through. You didn't just make mistakes. You systematically, consistently chose Emma over me. Every single time. And I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and I need you to hear it." She was crying now. "People were rooting to we were wrong. We see that now. We've been going to therapy, all three of us. Emma's trying. She's really trying." "That's good," I said. "But it's not my responsibility to be there for her. Or for you. I built my own life, Mom. I built it without you. And I'm not going to tear it down because you suddenly feel guilty." "I don't feel guilty," my mother said. "I feel sorry. I feel regret. I feel like I lost my daughter and I don't know how to get her back." "You can't," I said gently. "The daughter you had is gone. She died a long time ago. And the person you're talking to now, she's someone else. Someone who learned to survive without you. And she's not going to unlearn that just because you're here." My mother was sobbing now, loud, ugly sobs that drew even more attention. I didn't have the energy to deal with this. I signaled to my head of security, who read at my elbow. "Please escort Mrs. Mills to the exit," I said. "And make sure she gets a car home." "Aurora, please," my mother begged as the security guard took her arm, "please don't do this. Please." I watched her go. And for a moment, I felt nothing. Just emptiness. A vast, hollow space where emotion used to live. And then I felt a hand on my arm. Priya, my oldest friend, who had become my sea and my anchor. Her husband, Mark, stood beside her, looking concerned. "Are you okay?" Priya asked. "I will be," I said. "I always am." I wasn't, of course. But I'd learned, years ago, how to be the person who was always okay. The person who didn't need anyone. The person who had built her own life, and didn't let anyone tear it down. But that night, when I got home to my empty apartment, I collapsed on the couch and cried. I cried for the daughter I'd been. I cried for the parents I'd never really had. I cried for a childhood that had been stolen from me, and a love that had never been given. And when I was done, I sat up and wiped my face. I looked around my beautiful apartment, with its walls full of art I loved and books I'd read and photos of friends who actually read about me. That I was okay. I was more than okay. I was successful, and I was strong, and I was worthy of love. But I was still human. And being human meant I was allowed to grieve for the things I'd never had. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a determination to get back to work. Work was safe. Work was predictable. Work didn't ask me to be vulnerable or open or anything other than brilliant and driven. I was in my office by 7, reviewing the quarterly earnings report, when Simone knocked on my door. Ms. Mills, there's something you should see. She handed me a tablet with a news article pulled up. It was from a small local paper in my hometown. The headline read, "Local philanthropist and businessman suffers major heart attack." I skimmed the article. My father was in stable condition, but he'd need extensive rehabilitation. The article mentioned his estranged daughter, tech mogul Aurora Mills, and speculated about whether she would visit. I set the tablet down and leaned back in my chair. The question hung in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Should I go? In my previous life, I would have gone. I would have dropped everything and rushed to his bedside, desperate for the chance to prove myself to EAR and his love through sheer force of devotion. I would have sat by his bed and held his hand and pretended that everything was fine. But I wasn't that person anymore. I picked up my phone and called my therapist. Dr. Patel had been seeing me for 6 years, ever since I'd finally admitted that I couldn't fix everything on my own. She was the one who'd helped me understand that my parents' neglect wasn't my fault, and that I didn't have to keep trying to EAR and their approval. Dr. Patel, I said when she answered. My father had a heart attack. He's in the hospital. I heard her take a slow breath. How do you feel about that? Complicated, I admitted. Part of me wants to go see him. Part of me wants to stay as far away as possible. And part of me just doesn't see a re. Is that terrible? It's not terrible, she said. It's human. You've spent your entire life trying to EAR and the love of people who couldn't give it to you. Of course your feelings are complicated. The question is, what do you need right now? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I need to not be the person who rushes to the hospital and pretends everything is fine. I need to be the person who makes a choice based on what's actually healthy for her. And what would that look like? I took a deep breath. I think I need to go. Not for him. Not for my mother. For me. I need to see him, and I need to be okay with whatever happens. I need to prove to myself that I can be in that room and not fall apart. That sounds very mature, Dr. Patel said. But I want you to promise me something. If it gets too much, you'll leave. You don't have to stay. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. I promise, I said. That I booked a flight for the next morning. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't want the drama, the expectation, the refull choreography of family dynamics. That I just wanted to see my father. And then I wanted to leave. The hospital was small and tired, like the town itself. I walked through the automatic doors and up to the information desk, feeling like a stranger in a place that should have been familiar. Room 312, the volunteer said. He's in the cardiac wing. I took the elevator up. My heart was pounding, and my hands were clammy. I was 36 years old, a billionaire and I was terrified of walking into a hospital room. The door to room 312 was half open. I could hear voices inside. My mother's, high and anxious. And my father's, weak but recognizable. I'm fine, he was saying. It was just a SCA. Can we please go home? You can't go home, my mother said. The doctor said you need to stay for observation. They're just covering their bases. I'm fine. I pushed the door open. They both turned to look at me. My mother's face went white. My father's eyes widened. Aurora, my mother breathed. You came. I walked into the room, my heels clicking on the linoleum floor. My father was propped up in the bed, looking pale and smaller than I remembered. There were tubes running into his arms and a monitor beeping softly beside him. Hi, Dad, I said. Aurora. His voice cracked. I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I. I pulled up a chair and sat down. How are you feeling? Better now that you're here. He reached out his hand, and I took it. His skin was thin and dry, his grip weak. I thought about you a lot, in the hospital. Thought about everything I should have done differently. This is a great thing, isn't it? My mother said. A family reunion. We should. Mom, can you give us a minute? I asked, not taking my eyes off my father. I'd like to talk to him alone. She looked between us, then nodded slowly. Of course. I'll be in the waiting room. She left, and the door clicked shut behind her. My father and I were alone. I'm sorry, he said, before I could speak. I know I should have said it years ago. I'm sorry for everything, Aurora. For not being there. For not seeing you. For making you feel like you didn't matter. You made me feel like I didn't exist, I said, and my voice was steady. There's a difference. I know. His eyes were wet. I know, and I hate myself for it. You were such a good kid. So smart, so determined. And I was so caught up in Emma's needs, in her drama, that I forgot to see you. Forgot, I repeated. That's the word you're going with. I don't have a good word, he said. I don't have any excuse. I was a bad father to you. A terrible father. And I spent the last 10 years watching you succeed from afar, hoping you'd give me a chance to make it right. And now, I asked. Now that I'm here, now I want you to know that I'm proud of you, he said. I've always been proud of you. I just didn't know how to show it. I didn't know how to be the father you needed. I sat there, holding his hand, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It wasn't even healing. It was just acceptance. An understanding that he was who he was, and he'd done what he'd done, and nothing could change that. But I could change how I responded to it. Thank you, I said. For saying that. It means more than you know. He squeezed my hand. Does this mean you'll stay? We could try again. All of us. Your mother, Emma, you and me. We could be a family again. I shook my head. I can't, Dad. I can't pretend that everything is fine. I can't pretend that the past didn't happen. But I can be here. Right now. And maybe, someday, we can figure out what a relationship between us looks like. But it's not going to be a family reunion. It's not going to be the way it was before. I'll take it, he said. I'll take whatever you can give. I stayed for an hour. We talked about small things, my work, his recovery, the weather. We didn't solve anything. We didn't fix anything. But for the first time in my life, I sat in a room with my father and didn't feel like I was begging for his approval. That I was just there. And that was enough. 6 months later, my father died. That I found out from an article in the local paper. A small obituary, buried in the back section, listing his surviving relatives, his wife, his daughter Emma, his grandchildren, and his estranged daughter, Aurora. Estranged. That word cut deeper than I wanted to admit. That I flew home for the funeral. Home, that strange, complicated word for a place that had never really felt like home to me. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just showed up, the morning of the service, and sat in the back of the small, nondescript church. The place was packed. My father had been a prominent figure in the community, active in his church, a respected businessman in his small town. People who had known him for decades came to pay their respects, their faces drawn with grief. My mother was in the front row, surrounded by relatives I barely knew. Emma sat beside her, her face tear-stained, a child balanced on her lap. She looked thinner than I remembered, and older. Life had not been kind to her. That I stayed in the back, my dark sunglasses hiding my eyes, my designer coat too expensive for this humble setting. I didn't want to draw attention. I just wanted to see what I'd missed. What I'd been missing, all these years. The service was long, full of speeches that painted a picture of a man I didn't recognize. A loving husband. A devoted father. A pillar of the community. I listened to them talk about the way he'd coached little league teams, the way he'd mentored young entrepreneurs, the way he'd opened his home to anyone in need. It felt like a lie. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe he'd been all those things to everyone else. Maybe I was the only person who'd seen another side of him, the cold side, the dismissive side, the side that had made me feel invisible. Or maybe I was the one who'd been blind. Maybe I'd been so focused on his flaws that I'd missed the good parts. Maybe I'd been so consumed by my own pain that I couldn't see his. I didn't know. I didn't know anything. After the service, I slipped out the back before anyone could see me. I was halfway to my rental car when I heard footsteps behind me. Aurora. I turned and found Emma standing there, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked lost. Broken. Like someone who'd been fighting a losing battle for years. Emma, I said that I knew you'd be here. She stepped closer, and for a moment, I thought she was going to try to hit me. But instead, she just stood there, trembling. You could have come to see him before he died. You could have made peace with him. But you were too busy being perfect and successful and above it all. Emma, I'm not going to fight with you about this. Fight with me, she laughed, a bitter sound. You don't fight with anyone. You just walk away. You've always just walked away. You walked away from Mom and Dad, from me, from this family. And now he's gone, and you'll never get to tell him what. I asked. That I loved him, that I needed him. He knew that. He always knew that. And he didn't see enough to do anything about it. Emma's face crumpled. He did see He see read so much, Aurora. You have no idea how much he regretted everything. He spent years trying to figure out how to fix things. How to reach you. But you wouldn't let him. Because he never tried, I said. Not once. Not until I was successful. Not until I was in the news. He only wanted to know me when I was worth knowing. That's not true. Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. He was proud of you, Aurora. He was so proud of you. He used to show people your articles, brag to his friends about what you'd accomplished. He just didn't know how to show it to you. None of us did. We're not good at that kind of thing. I wanted to believe her. A part of me, a wounded part that had never quite healed, desperately wanted to believe her. But I'd been burned too many times. He chose you, I said, and my voice cracked. Every single time. He chose you. Emma shook her head. He chose me because I needed to be chosen. You didn't. You were always so strong, so capable, so together. You didn't need anyone. But I did. I needed them so badly, and I hated it, and I hated you for not needing them too. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I'm sorry, Aurora. I'm so sorry. For everything. I stood there, in the parking lot of that little church, and I looked at my sister, who had been my nemesis, my rival, the person who had stolen my parents' love. And I realized, for the first time, that she hadn't stolen anything. She'd been given something that should have been shared. And she'd accepted it, because who wouldn't accept being loved? Thank you, I said finally. For saying that. Emma sniffled. Are you coming to the burial? I shook my head. I can't. I can't pretend to be part of a family that never made room for me. You are part of this family, Emma said. You've always been part of this family. We just didn't show it well. We didn't know how. I looked at her for a long moment. She was my sister. She was human. She was flawed and broken and hurting, just like me. That maybe, I said. Maybe one day we can figure out how to be sisters. But not today. Today I need to grieve the father I never really had. And I need to do it alone. Emma nodded, and there was something understanding in her eyes. I can do that. I can wait. I walked away. I got into my rental car and I drove back to the airport. I took the first flight home, and I spent the next 3 days in bed, rely eating, rely sleeping. That I was grieving. Not just for my father, but for everything. For the childhood I never had. For the love I never received. For the family I'd never really been part of. But when I came out of it, I was different. Something had shifted inside me. The anger was gone. The bitterness had faded. What was left was just acceptance. A quiet understanding that I couldn't change the past. I could only choose how to move forward. A month after the funeral, I got a letter from Emma. Handwritten, on paper that smelled faintly of lavender. It was long, 3 pages, and it took me a full hour to read because I kept having to stop and wipe my eyes. That she talked about our childhood from her perspective. The pressure she'd felt to be perfect, to be the one our parents could be proud of. The guilt she'd ride because she knew, on some level, that she was getting more than I was. The way she'd compensated by being cruel, because it was easier to push me away than to admit that she didn't deserve what she was given. She talked about the gallery debacle, and how it had been the wake-up call she'd needed. The years of struggling, of watching our parents drain their savings to help her, of feeling like a failure every single day. The therapy she'd root, the work she'd done on herself. And she talked about our father's last months. The way he'd talked about me constantly, the way he'd watched the news for any mention of my name, the way he'd cried when he thought no one was looking. That she ended the letter with a simple request: can we try again? I know I don't deserve it. But I'd like to try. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in the drawer with all the other letters I'd never answered. That I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I was closer than I'd ever been. The next root seeing Emma. Just phone calls at first, awkward and stilted, full of long silences and refill words. Then video calls, where I could see her face and she could see mine. Then, finally, an in-person meeting. That we met in a coffee shop in the city, neutral ground. We both ordered lattes and sat at a small table by the window, 2 strangers trying to figure out how to be family. I don't know how to do this, Emma admitted. I've never had a real sister. I've only ever had a rival. Same, I said. But I think we can figure it out. Slowly. And we did. It took years of therapy, of learning to trust each other, of forgiving each other for things that couldn't be unsaid. But we did it. My mother was her rider. She'd spent her whole life enabling Emma, and she didn't know how to stop. She still called me, still wrote letters, still begged me to come home and be the daughter she'd always wanted. But I'd learned to set boundaries. I'd learned to say no. I'd learned that I was worthy of love, and that I didn't have to settle for the scraps of affection that my parents had thrown my way. Eventually, my mother came around. It took time, and a lot of hard conversations, but she root to see me. Really see me. The person I was, not the person she'd wanted me to be. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real. Tonight, I was hosting the Novatech Gala again. The venue was different, a grand hotel downtown, with SOA ring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. The guest list was even more impressive than before. I was at the top of my game, and I'd never been happier. I stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd of donors, investors, and celebrities. My team was scattered throughout the room, chatting with potential partners and old friends. Priya was NEAR the BAR, laughing at something Mark had said. And in the back, standing NEAR the entrance, were three figures. My mother, Emma, and Emma's daughter, a bright-eyed 6-year-old named Lily who'd inherited my sister's smile and none of her angst. I walked off the stage and made my way toward them. The crowd parut around me like I was a ship cutting through water. Mom, I said. Emma. You came. We wanted to see you, my mother said, and her eyes were wet. We're so proud of you, Aurora. Thanks, Mom. I hugged her, and it felt natural. We'd come a long way from the hospital room where she'd told me to hurry up and be ridged. Aunt Aurora. Lily tugged on my sleeve. Mommy said you have a really big castle. Can I see it? It's not a castle, I said, laughing. It's a building. But it is pretty big. Maybe I'll give you a tour later. Emma stepped forward. She was wearing a simple dress, nothing flashy, but she looked healthier than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes were clear, and her smile was genuine. Thank you for inviting us, she said. I know it's not easy. It's not easy for any of us, I said. But we're working on it. That's what matters. We stood there, the four of us, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of a family. Not the perfect family, not the one I'd always dreamed of. But a real one, with all its flaws and complications. I never thought I'd be here, I said, looking at them. I never thought we'd be okay. But we are. We're not perfect, but we're okay. We are. My mother agreed. We've come a long way. I've made a lot of mistakes, Emma said. But I'm trying to be better. For Lily. For you. For myself. I hugged her. It was a real hug, not the stiff, awkward embrace we'd read at the funeral. It was the hug of two sisters who'd finally figured out how to be on the same side. Can I have a hug too? Lily asked. I scped her up and held her close. She smelled like shampoo and childhood and hope. Of course, I said. You can have all the hugs you want. And in that moment, surrounded by my family, I finally understood what it meant to be whole. I hadn't needed them to fix my past. I'd needed them to be part of my present. And they were. We were going to be okay. All of us. Not because the past was erased, but because we'd chosen to move forward together. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything that it took 2 years for Emma and me to rebuild our relationship. It was slow work, painful and awkward, full of false starts and painful silences. But we did it, one conversation at a time. She went to therapy. She got sober. She got a real job and taking care of herself. And I learned to let her in. Slowly. Fully. The way you might let a wounded animal approach you, wary of sudden movements, ready to back away at the first sign of danger. My mother was the hardest part. She'd spent her entire life enabling Emma, and she didn't know how to stop. She still called me, still wrote letters, still begged me to come home and be the daughter she'd always wanted. But I'd learned to set boundaries. I'd learned to say no. I'd learned that I was worthy of love, and that I didn't have to settle for the scraps of affection that my parents had thrown my way. Eventually, she came around. It took time, and a lot of hard conversations, but she to see me. Really see me. The person I was, not the person she'd wanted me to be. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real. That I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, looking out at the city I'd conquered. 20 years had passed since I'd woken up in that hospital bed, 20 years since I'd decided to stop being invisible. I was 56 years old now, and I'd built an empire that spanned continents. I'd done everything I'd set out to do, and more. But the thing that surprised me most was that I'd also built something else. Something I'd never expected to have. A family. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Lily wants to know if you're coming to her piano recital tonight. She said she'll play extra loud if you're not there. I smiled and typed back, tell her I'll be there. Front row. With flowers. Emma responded with a heart emoji, and I put the phone down. That simple exchange, that easy RMTH, had taken years to build. But now it was natural. It was ours. My mother was living in a small apartment near Emma, close enough to help with Lily but far enough to maintain her independence. She'd finally stopped trying to control everything, to fix everything, to make everything perfect. She'd learned to just be. And that had made all the difference. The Novatech Gala that year was different from all the others. It was smaller, more intimate. I'd stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the company a year ago, handing the reins to a brilliant young I'd mentored from her first day as an intern. I was still involved, still the face of the company, but I'd given myself permission to slow down. Tonight, I wasn't the host. I was just a guest. I walked into the ballroom, and the first person I saw was Emma. She was standing near the bar, talking to Priya, and they were laughing about something. It was a sight I'd never thought I'd see, my best friend and my sister, getting along like they'd known each other for years. Aurora. Priya spotted me first and waved me over. Your sister is telling me stories about you as a kid. Did you really once try to build a rocket in the backyard? That was a serious scientific endeavor, I said, joining them. It just happened to explode. And that's why you became a tech mogul instead of an astronaut, Emma said, grinning. Better sense of self-preservation. We all laughed, and I felt a RMTH spread through me. This was what I'd always wanted. Not the money, not the fame, not the success. Just this. The simple joy of being with people who read about me. I'm going to check on the catering, Priya said, excusing herself. You two catch up. Emma and I moved to a quieter corner of the room. She looked good, healthy, happy, at peace. The years of struggle had left their mark on her face, but they'd also given her a wisdom she hadn't had before. Thanks for being here, I said. I know galas aren't really your thing. Neither is being the boring sister who stays home, she said. I'm trying to have more fun. You've been a good influence. Me the workaholic. You, the woman who taught me that it's okay to ask for help, Emma said. You, the sister who gave me a second chance. You, the person who never gave up on me, even when I didn't deserve it. I looked at her, really looked at her. My sister. The girl who'd gotten everything I'd ever wanted, and who'd ended up broken by it. The woman who'd fought her way back, piece by piece, until she'd found herself again. Neither of us were easy, I said. But we got here. We did. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Aurora. Not for the company or the money. For who you are. For being the person you've become. It was the first time she'd ever said that to me. The first time anyone in my family had truly seen me, and told me I was enough. I blinked back. Thanks, Emma. That means everything. I mean it. She squeezed my hand again. I know I wasn't the sister you deserved. I know I was selfish and cruel and blind. But I'm trying to be better. And I'm so grateful that you let me try. We're both trying, I said. That's all that matters. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of the ballroom, looking out at the city lights. The noise of the gala faded behind me, muffled by the glass doors. It was a perfect night, clear our sky, CL breeze, the stars just visible through the glow of the city. I thought about my father. I'd never really resolved things with him. The visit to the hospital had been the last time I'd seen him alive, and even that had been incomplete. I'd left before I could say everything I needed to say. Before I could tell him that I forgave him. But maybe forgiveness wasn't something you said. Maybe it was something you did. Maybe it was the act of moving forward, of choosing not to be defined by the past. That I thought about my mother, and how far we'd come. She'd never be the perfect parent I'd wanted her to be. But she was trying. And that was more than I'd ever expected. I thought about Emma, and Lily, and the family we'd built together. It wasn't the family I'd grown up with. It was better. Because it was built on choice, not obligation. On love, not guilt. That I felt a presence beside me and turned to see Priya. That thought I'd find you out here, she said, handing me a glass of champagne. Getting overwhelmed a little, I admitted. But in a good way. I was just thinking about how much things have changed. Change is good, Priya said. You've changed the most. You used to be so closed off, so guarded. Now you're open. Warm. You're like a different person. I am a different person, I said. The person I was before, she was just surviving. She didn't know how to be happy. She didn't think she deserved it. And now, I looked out at the city, my city, the one I'd built and conquered and loved. Now I know I deserve it. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be loved. And I'm not going to apologize for any of it. That's my girl, Priya said, raising her glass. To second chances. To second chances, I echoed. That we clinked glasses and drank. The champagne was crisp and cold, and it tasted like victory. Like hope. Like the future. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city was already awake, bustling with life and possibility. I stretched and got out of bed, feeling more rested than I had in years. That I had a full day ahead, a meeting with the new C, a lunch with my mother, and Lily's piano recital in the evening. It was a full life, a rich life, a life I'd never expected to have. As I was getting ready, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Lily wants to know if you're still coming tonight. She's nervous. I smiled and typed back, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Tell her to practice her scale. It's the most important one. Emma responded with a laughing emoji, and I set the phone down. I looked at myself in the mirror, the face that had been invisible for so many years, now the face of a woman who had built a life worth living. That I was happy. Truly, deeply, genuinely happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd finally learned to accept that nothing needed to be perfect. Love, family, forgiveness, they were all messy. They were all complicated. And they were all worth fighting for. I thought about my father again. About the last time I'd seen him, that day in the hospital. He'd said he was proud of me. He'd said he loved me. And even though it had been too little, too late, it had been something. I'd made peace with it. I'd made peace with him. And I'd made peace with myself. The woman who'd died in that car accident at 34, she'd been a victim of her parents' neglect, of her own inability to see her own worth. But I wasn't her anymore. I was someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who had taken all that pain and turned it into a life of purpose. I walked out of my apartment and into the day. The sun was warm on my face, and the air smelled like possibility. I had places to go, people to see, a life to live. And for the first time, I wasn't doing it alone. At the piano recital that night, I sat in the front row, just like I'd promised. Lily was dressed in a frilly pink dress, her hair perfectly curled, and she was so nervous that she was practically shaking. "That you'll do great," I whispered as she walked past me to the stage. "Just remember to breathe." She nodded, her eyes wide, and took her seat at the piano. The first few notes were shaky, uncertain. But then she found her rhythm, and the music swelled, filling the room with something beautiful and simple and pure. That I looked over at Emma, who was crying silently, a tissue pressed to her face. My mother was beside her, holding her hand. And I realized that we were all crying, the three of us, sitting together, watching Lily play. That she finished her piece to a round of applause. She stood up and bowed, and her eyes found mine in the crowd. She smiled. I smiled back. And in that moment, I knew that everything I'd done, the work, the struggle, the fight to be seen, had been worth it. Because it had led me here. To this moment. To this family. Lily ran over to us after the recital, her face flushed with excitement. "Did you hear me, Aunt Aurora? Did you hear my scale?" "I heard every single note," I said, pulling her into a hug. "You were amazing." "I was so red," she admitted. "But then I saw you smiling, and I wasn't red anymore." I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, the innocence of her childhood. "I'll always be here," I said. "I'll always be smiling." Later that night, after the recital was over and everyone had gone home, I sat in my apartment and looked through an old box of photographs. It was a box I'd kept for years, full of images from my childhood. I'd never had the heart to throw it away. There was a photo of me at 7, holding up a trophy I'd won for a spelling bee. My parents were standing behind me, but their faces were turned toward Emma, who was off to the side, doing something that had distracted them. There was a photo of me at 16, wearing a dress I'd sewn myself for prom. My parents had been too busy with Emma's art show to help me pick it out. There was a photo of me at 22, the day I'd root Novatech. I was standing in front of my first office, my face determined, but there was a loneliness in my eyes. And then there were the photos I'd taken in the last few years, me and Emma, laughing. Me and my mother, hugging. Me and Lily, at her birthday party, covered in cake and smiles. The difference was night and day. The girl in the old photos had been invisible. The woman in the new photos was anything but. I closed the box and put it back on the shelf. The past was the past. I couldn't change it. I couldn't fix it. I could only accept it, and move forward. I walked to my window and looked out at the city. It was late, but the lights were still on, 1,000 points of brightness in the darkness. It was beautiful. It was alive. It was full of possibility. I'd spent my whole life trying to be seen. Trying to be loved. Trying to be enough. And I'd finally realized that I'd always been enough. The problem wasn't me. It was the people who'd refused to see me. But I'd found people who did see me. I'd built a life where I mattered. And I'd learned to love myself, even when no one else did. I took a deep breath, savoring the peace of the moment. Tomorrow, there would be more work to do, more challenges to face, more life to live. But tonight, I was content. I was done running. I was done hiding. I was done being invisible. I was home.